time to be a member of Blackpool Council and to be aware of the great developments which are taking place in the middle of our town. We have a couple of our chief officers looking in, and we've got Carl Carrington is here and Susan Parker, our chief planners, and we'll be grateful to them in introducing some of the topics. But we've also got quite a few of our people online, like you as citizens watching us, and they're ready to give advice as and when they're called upon to do so. So, item 1, colleagues, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Shaking of heads, so we can take that as decided. And then item 2 is for you to agree or otherwise that the minutes of the last meeting that have been circulated are true and accurate. That's moved by Councillor Robertson. It's seconded by Councillor Stansfield. Just requires me to sign. Thank you very much. And then can we turn to item 3, which is our report on planning enforcement for the period, is it October? Well, you'll note the planning appeals which have been lodged, the Bond Street matter, Maida Vale, and obviously the department will respond to those appeals. Noted? Thank you. And similarly, you have item 4, which is, again, just to note the enforcement report, the numbers of cases which our enforcement team have taken on and resolved, and you will note the section 215 notices which have been issued on 2 of the properties of which complaint has been made. For noting, thank you. And then, would you note item 6 is a resume of our performance in processing applications in accordance with the government's requirements of us, and you will see again that we're meeting the performance targets very well indeed. And I think we often ask Susan if she will pass on our thanks and gratitude to the department, her little team that make sure these figures are met. Item 7, I think members don't always realise, unless they do regularly, see the input of applications that are coming in. There doesn't seem to have been any let-up, despite the 2 years virtually under the pandemic. And to try and achieve the turnaround and meet those targets, sometimes it puts a bit of a strain on the question of delegations. And the paper before you, it asks you to agree to an extension of the scheme of delegation to our senior planners. Not that there are many of them. Do you want to speak on it, Susan?
Thank you, Chairman. It's not an extension in terms of the types of application that would be delegated or any changes to what would come before committee. It would merely mean that a senior planner is permitted to actually sign off an application. Obviously, we would make sure that the applications are signed off by an appropriate officer in terms of experience. But it does mean that senior planners will gain experience of signing off applications and checking applications, and it means that during periods of leave, of annual leave, of either myself or Claire as a principal, we have a bit more flexibility in the team so that deadlines aren't at risk of being missed.
Is everybody happy with that? Seems a sensible housekeeping exercise. Thank you very much. That's agreed. And then we turn to the planning applications before us. The first one being 3436 adjacent Moss House Road, a barn conversion. This is down at the case officer at Pippa Greenway, but I think you, Susan, are going to take this and introduce it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to a locally listed redundant barn building on Moss House Road. The loss of the building is unfortunate, as set out in the office report, but its character and heritage value has already been lost as a result of modern alterations to its main elevation. It is proposed that the barn would be replaced by a 2-storey, 5-bedroom family home with a detached garage. Subject to an appropriate building recording, the Council's Built Heritage Manager raises no objection. The Civic Trust has, however, objected, and 6 representations have been received from local residents, and these are detailed in the office report. The site is surrounded by the Kensington Redwood Point development and other residential properties, and so the principle of residential use is acceptable. Despite the objections, the proposal has been considered in relation to the amenities of nearby neighbours and is considered to be acceptable. Visually, whilst the property would be notably larger than those adjacent, it would be comparable to some of the properties on the Redwood Point estate. The design of the property has been amended since first submission to create a stronger vertical emphasis and reduce the scale of the porch to ensure that it is not a over-dominating feature. And subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions and notwithstanding the concerns raised by neighbours, no objections have been raised by consultees in relation to highway safety or drainage. Appropriate ecological safeguarding enhancement is proposed and can be secured through condition. The scheme would contribute an additional dwelling to the borough's housing supply, but this carries little weight in the planning balance as we can identify a 5-year supply of housing land. And the scheme wouldn't generate any requirement for planning obligations. As the alterations to the frontage have significantly eroded the heritage value of the barn for which it was locally listed, on balance, its replacement with a good quality family dwelling is considered to be acceptable. And as such, members are respectfully recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions listed at the end of the office report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is for approval. Anybody want to speak on that? Does anybody want to move it? Vice Chairman, proposed. Anybody to second? Yeah, nobody. I'll second it. Moved and seconded. Anybody wishes to speak? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour, please show for approval of the application. Nobody against. It's a unanimous decision for approval. Thank you very much. And then a major development in the north of the town, land at Ryscar Way. 51 houses to go up there in this application. Claire Johnson is going to introduce this for us. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair members. The next item on the agenda is an application for full planning permission for a major residential scheme of 51 houses on a Greenfield site to the west of Faraday Way. 2.6 hectare site comprises approximately 0.6 hectares of public open space and a public right-of-way in flood zones 2 and 3 in the west of the site, and a 2 hectare field to the east of the site, which has historically been used for grazing. There are established hedgerow along the north and west boundary and a fragmented hedgerow bisects the site. There's a pond to the south adjacent to the former Bispam Hospital, which is connected to a wider pond network on the North Blackpool Pond Trail and the King Craig Nature Reserve. The site's surrounded by development on three sides, with greenbelt and farmland to the east of Faraday Way and Wyre. The administrative boundary between Blackpool and Wyre runs through the east of the site, and there's a corresponding application currently under consideration by Wyre Borough Council. 16 of the houses proposed will be affordable and will be accessed off Ricegall Way, and 35 of the houses will be general market homes, and they'd be accessed off a new road off Faraday Way. Given that Blackpool's got a significant unmet need for affordable housing, the provision here is welcomed and would accord with policy CS14, and this weighs in favour of the application. Financial contributions towards the provision or enhancement of off-site public open space and health contributions towards an extension at St Paul's Surgery and reconfiguration of Moore Park Health Centre have been agreed and will be secured through a Section 106 agreement. Further health contributions of over £150,000 have been requested from the NHS Trust to cover a shortfall in budgets associated with an anticipated population increase as a result of this development. As set out in the report, your office has considered that this request would constitute a levy or a tariff, and the courts have made it clear that Section 106 funding cannot comprise a generalised tariff or compensate for budget deficits, and it's therefore recommended that committee don't pursue this contribution. It's acknowledged that there are a few local shops in the area. However, the site is close to schools, employment opportunities, green space, and is close to several bus routes. The site benefits from outline planning permission for up to 47 dwellings, and it's allocated for housing under the Emerging Local Plan Part 2. In terms of the housing mix, the affordable homes would have a mix of 2 and 3 beds and would either be semi-detached or in terraced rows. The market homes would have between 3 and 4 beds and would either be semi-detached or detached. The proposed housing density will be 25.5 dwellings per hectare, and this density and housing mix is considered to be reasonable in this area. As such, the scheme is considered to be acceptable in principle. In terms of floor space and layout, the smaller houses would fall short of the nationally described space standards, but would be sufficient to meet the needs of the occupiers nonetheless, and the layout and separation distances will be sufficient to protect privacy. It's felt that any undue amenity impacts arising from noise during construction could be adequately avoided through the imposition of the conditions recommended. The designs of the properties are considered to be acceptable in their context, and as are the materials, and the appearance of the development will be enhanced by tree and hedgerow planting. Subject to conditions, the design and layout of the development is considered to be acceptable. Whilst there have been neighbour objections in relation to highway safety, no unacceptable highway issues have been identified, and the proposed parking provision would meet standards. The application has been reviewed by the Head of Highways and Traffic Management and Lancashire County Council Highways Authority, and no concerns have been raised subject to conditions. Objections to the scheme include increased flood risk for properties to the north of the site. Cross-sections have been submitted which show that proposed houses to the north of the site would be on lower land than properties fronting Bordeaux Crescent, and so surface water would not flow onto those properties. Subject to conditions requiring the submission of a detailed drainage strategy and management plan and adherence to the mitigation measures in the flood risk assessment, no issues related to flood risk or drainage have been identified. Moving on to ecology, as set out in the report, the loss of the hedgerow along the north and the west of the housing site is disappointing, and they understand the objectors' concerns, and this does weigh against the proposal. Despite the hedgerows being species poor, in accordance with policy CS6, its loss would not be acceptable without sufficient compensation, mitigation and replacement provision. The case office has discussed the application at length with the Council's ecology consultants in relation to maintaining pond connectivity and the loss of the hedgerow, and as a result has required the submission of a more robust indicative landscaping scheme in advance of presenting the application to committee. The landscaping scheme now indicates replacement hedgerow planting in the public open space, comprising a range of species which will provide a more biodiverse habitat than the existing hedgerow. Further native hedgerow planting in the public open space along the northern boundary and along Faraday Way is considered necessary in order to mitigate the loss of the existing hedgerow, and those details will be agreed by condition. Securing the additional native hedgerow planting, along with a proposed provision of over 100 heavy standard trees, a range of smaller trees and shrubs, wildflower meadows in the public open space, and appropriate aquatic planting in the attenuation basin will provide benefits to biodiversity, as well as enhancing visual amenity in the area. Agreeing boundary treatments, types, designs and positions would also support the passage of wildlife through and around the site and maintain that pond connectivity. A scheme of other ecological enhancements, such as incorporating bird and bat boxes into the houses, would also benefit biodiversity. So on balance, subject to conditions, it's considered that the proposal would satisfy the required green infrastructure compensatory measures, mitigation and replacement requirements set out in policy CS6. And overall, the development proposed is considered to constitute sustainable development. Members are respectively recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions in the officer report and the signing of a section 106 agreement to secure health and public open space contributions.
Could I ask Claire, if you are fully satisfied with the provision that's been negotiated for greening the site, and are they going to be of significantly aged trees that are planted by the developer? We don't want trees that are going to be so small that they're easily uprooted, but obviously the more senior a tree is, the more expensive it is.
Yeah, the provision of the heavy standard trees. The heavy standard trees typically to be between 3 and 3.5 metres tall, which obviously is quite a substantial tree. I'm quite content with the range of species. The most of the species that are proposed are native, including English oak, ash, crabapple. And I think we could agree by condition additional native hedge planting along the northern boundary, along Faraday Way as part of the section 278 highway works. And I have spoken to the agent about this and they are content with that approach.
Thank you for that. I'm now going to bring in Mr. Brian Holt and his colleague Miss Rachel Monks. They're objecting to the proposal. They're going to share the 7 minutes allocated to them.
Good evening. I'd like to make you aware how dangerous Ryscar Way is currently, how this proposal increases the road safety dangers, and what can be done to reduce the accident risk. This is a Google image of the site included in your pack, Appendix 9. This is Ryscar Way, this is the care home, this is the development site, this is Tennyson Drive leading to the Westminster Gardens estate. There are 154 homes on Westminster Gardens with only one access road, so there's a lot of traffic on it. All traffic from the estate comes into Tennyson Drive, into Ryscar Way, thence into King Craig and out, and the reverse flow along Ryscar Way and into Tennyson Drive. This is a busy stretch of road, whereas the side road leading to the care home, it has little traffic. There are 2 houses on Ryscar Way. I live in this one next to the roundabout. Rachel lives in this one next door. Our address is Tennyson Drive, but physically our houses are on Ryscar Way. This is nominally a roundabout. Drivers approaching on Tennyson Drive can see the care home exit is clear, so in practice they don't slow down and keep going into Ryscar Way at speed. You can see the road is a curve, not a sharp bend, not a sharp corner, so there is nothing to slow them until they happen to meet me or my neighbours driving on or off our driveways directly in their path. I can't see them coming round the bend and they can't see me until they're almost on me. A collision is avoided only by quick reactions and having room to take avoiding action. The proposal puts 6 houses on Ryscar Way into the busy traffic flow next to the dangerous junction. There's going to be vehicles moving on and off driveways, delivery vehicles at the curb, and visitors parked at the curb since there's no visitor parking provided in the proposal. Vehicles moving on or off driveways will be in the direct path of vehicles coming around the bend. Parked vehicles will limit the room for getting out of the way of oncoming vehicles. It will be even more dangerous than the current situation. The outline planning permission given in 2019 for this site is for 47 homes. It does not give permission to put houses on this busy stretch of Ricegall Way. This is the access statement from 2019. Note it is green land along Ricegall Way, right up to the roundabout where they're currently proposing to put 6 houses. Access on the existing permission is clearly marked as from the side road by the care home. This is a much safer situation than the current proposal. Let's keep it this way. The present application did not start out a year ago with 6 houses on Ricegall Way. The developer ran into problems fitting 51 homes onto the site, such as a lack of turning space for vehicles. In solving these problems and trying to keep to their target of 51 homes, they've ended up putting 6 houses on Ricegall Way with consequent road safety problems. Perhaps 51 homes is too many to fit safely on this site. Note the current permission is for 47 homes. The developer should look again at the layout and avoid having houses fronting Ricegall Way in accordance with the current planning permission and road safety good practice. Additionally, speed bumps are urgently needed on Tennyson Drive on the approach to this roundabout to slow vehicles to a sensible speed on the blind bend. Traffic calming. Just stand and watch and you'll see the absurdly high speeds cars come round this bend. In conclusion, I ask the committee to address the road safety dangers on Ricegall Way by installing speed bumps to slow traffic and urge you to reject this application, which will make road safety worse if accepted. Thank you for listening to me. I'll now hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I just want to reiterate it's already a very dangerous stretch of road. I have near misses on a weekly basis trying to manoeuvre off my driveway, and we have already lost a family pet who was knocked over in front of our house because of a speeding driver, which could very easily have been a child. Now, as a mother and a primary teacher, I have child safety as a huge concern, and my children are now, the youngest is 16, but I certainly would not be happy if I had young children playing out on the front at that junction. So the orientation of the houses is not suitable at all. It would be much safer for them to be face the much quieter road opposite Piston Gardens, and this would solve all of the road safety problems raised. Thank you, that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Mr. Holt and Mrs. Monks, for addressing us in that way. We shall bear your remarks in mind. I'm going now to invite the applicant, Mr. Andrew Booth, to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members. My name's Andrew Booth. I'm the Managing Director of the applicant and the proposed developer, Create Homes. Create are a family-owned Blackpool-based business who are proud to be investing in local communities, and we're excited at the prospect of delivering our high-quality residential product in our hometown. We've been working closely with your officers for over 12 months on this application, and I would like to thank them for their help in processing the same. If approved, the scheme will ensure an investment of over £13 million in the local community and its economy, and secure the delivery of 51 high-quality homes, including affordable housing in strict accordance with the Council's documented requirements and planning policy. Much has changed in the world over the last couple of years, as we're all aware, and the need to deliver a high-quality family housing and the associated regeneration, investment and employment benefits of this proposal have never been more important. Our delivery model is not about feeding national supply chains that make no positive or direct impact on the local economy. We're about using, where possible, local labour, local businesses, local suppliers, and investing directly into the local economy to help support local jobs for local people. The site, which is of course owned by the council, is excellently located to the north of Ricegall Way and adjoins Faraday Way in what is predominantly now a residential area. It benefits from a long-established planning history, which clearly supports residential development, and the site has been allocated for housing in the emerging local plan. In fact, as the officers mentioned, it benefits from an outline planning consent granted by yourselves in July 2019. This new application reflects the principles established in that permission, and if approved will ensure the delivery of a high quality, bespokely designed development providing larger than average properties that are aspirational and reflective of local character. This proposal follows the same principles as our highly acclaimed and successful schemes in Pilling, Inskip, Longton and Longridge. Your officers' report and the observations of other people that have made representations here identify the challenges for the site. And these challenges have resulted in the scheme that's presented for your consideration and has resulted in much change, including a reduction in numbers from our original proposals. We understand and share the observations of statutory consultees and the public who've made representations in identifying the key development constraints, which are access, drainage and ecology. And we're delighted that our proposals and the to deal with each of these challenges are supported by officers and have resulted in their recommendation for approval. As officers confirm, we've had comprehensive flood risk assessments undertaken and held extensive discussions with the Environment Agency, the Council as local lead flood authority for your area, Lancashire County Council as local lead flood authority for Wyre, where our outfall is, and United Utilities, all of whom have approved our drainage proposal subject to the conditions suggested by your officers. And we've also introduced a water storage and attenuation pond to ensure that water is stored on site and released into the wider surface water network at a controlled rate, which will also provide ecological and aesthetic benefits to the scheme and the wider area. We've also been working with the council and your experts in respect of ecology, especially how we can address the loss of hedgerows. And Claire very eloquently described the discussions we've been having and the mitigation plans that we intend to put in place to comply with Council's policy CS6. The topographical and other issues mean that the loss of poor quality hedgerows can't be avoided. So we've been working on the mitigation plans to introduce new higher quality hedgerows and wildlife corridors using natural species in key locations to compensate for this loss. The details are provided in the report, but we're fully supportive of the approach to agree a robust planning condition to ensure that we submit further and more detailed proposals for how this replacement strategy can be applied so that we are fully policy compliant. And we're looking forward to working with officers, other interested parties and your specialists to agree the same if the application is approved. In summary, our proposals for a better quality landscaping and ecological provision will result in more biodiversity and will align us fully to the goals included in your green and blue infrastructure strategy. In respect of access, all our highway proposals have been discussed and influenced by the experts. We've had lengthy discussions with Lancashire County Council, Highways England and your highways team as experts in the field, and all are supportive of our proposals and designs and have actually had a significant influence in the same. And I would just reiterate that the intention now is that only 16 units are accessed off Ricegall Way rather than the 47 units that were intended to be accessed under the outline application. Following discussions with the Council's affordable housing team, the proposal includes the 16 affordable dwellings for families, which will be available at affordable rent. These properties will be delivered by us and then managed by our registered provider partner, Great Places Housing Association. I note comments by officers in respect of pepper potting of these properties throughout the development, but that's not desirable from the RP's perspective as it makes management more difficult. In addition to the delivery of affordable homes, the scheme will also help us to deliver wider community benefits, including, as mentioned, a significant financial contribution to the provision of additional off-site open space, a financial contribution to support the extension of St Paul's Surgery, and a financial contribution to support the reconfiguration of Moore Park Health Centre. In summary, I would ask that members follow their officer's recommendation and support a well thought out, sympathetic proposal on an already allocated housing site that truly reflects local need and demand, is fully policy compliant, and will enable local people to live in a home that they want in a desirable location and will make a positive contribution to the local community. For this reason, we would implore you to support the application and grant consent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Booth. There were two issues raised by Mr. Holt and Mrs. Monks. One was the density of the development, and the other was the traffic issues and the problems which they believe the development will cause. I'm going to ask Mr. Patel, Latif Patel, if he's watching and listening, if he would like to add his thoughts on why, in the recommendation, the traffic issues are resolved in the way suggested by the developer. Mr. Patel, would you like to come in?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you. The transport assessment has been considered by officers on every level in terms of safety, trip generation, etc., and it's considered to be acceptable. I note the objection in relation to road safety on Ricecar Way, and the objector obviously mentions the fact that speeds are high along Ricecar Way. What I would say to that is, within the TA, it doesn't demonstrate or quantify the speeding issue along Ricecar Way. And what it may be beneficial if the committee consider this to be acceptable, that either the developer or highways themselves actually undertake some speed surveys to actually determine what the actual speeds are. And that would then inform, obviously, whether there is a issue with road safety along Ricecar Way. In relation to the layout and geometry, as I've just mentioned, it is acceptable. There has been extensive discussions with Create Homes in relation to the orientation of some of the properties, access, and how access is taken both from Kincraig Road and from Faraday Way. And as Mr. Booth has mentioned, there have been extensive discussions over a long period of time to make sure that the scheme is acceptable from a traffic and highways point of view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patel. Susan, do you want to come in on any of those points? Density was obviously one of the objectors' consideration. I don't know how far we respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the density, when we are looking at the number of units that are on a site, one of our key considerations is how it relates to the nearby area, but also highway safety and the number of units using the access points. And so the lack of objection from a highway officer is a significant element of our assessment of the acceptability of number. If I just respond to a couple of other points, the site is owned by the council. I have just checked the officer report, the financial section at the end. I would remind members that no weight can be put in the planning balance on the fact that the council would stand to benefit financially from the sale of the land. So that mustn't be afforded any weight in the planning balance. Latif suggested that additional speed surveys be secured if members are minded to support the scheme. We could do that through condition. If that's a route that you wanted to go down, we would secure speed surveys and any associated highway improvement works or highway modification works that those surveys revealed to be necessary. So that would be something that we could do through an additional condition if members wanted us to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Bring in Councillor Farrell now to speak on behalf of her residents in the immediate vicinity.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the residents of Ingthorpe Ward, where this development will be sited if approved. As the Ward Councillor, I have received many emails from several of my constituents concerned about many aspects of this development. I do appreciate that some of the issues raised to myself are similar to the objections in the report, and some will be dealt with by conditions. But I will share some of the excuse me. I will share some of the information that has been provided to me by my residents. Firstly, several of the residents are concerned about the risk of flooding should this application be approved. Standing water is evident throughout winter and happens from around November to about May time. Flooding is already happening this year, and Mr. Williams, one of my residents, has kindly shared some photos, which I think will be shared by John now, for the committee to see. Can the committee see those photos?
We're not aware of them, I don't think. Oh yes, they've come up now, yes. We've got them now, Councillor Farrell.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the first two pictures are from last week, and they are at the back of Mr. Williams' house. John, if you could move down for me, please, thank you. The next four photos are from March this year, and they show the flooding across the back of Mr. Williams' house and also his neighbours. The flooding also runs out of his property and across the right-hand side, and is approximately 40 metres square. You can see from the photos in front of you that the flooding has also taken a tree down. The final four photos, John, if you could move that down, please, thank you, are from December last year. And these are from the right of Mr. Williams' house. And he has reported to me that at its deepest, the flooding was around 3 to 4 feet deep. I've also been made aware that the houses on Champagne Avenue flooded a few years ago. And there are many concerns about all the housing being built on land that borders the ward and the effect that this will have on the flooding issues. Thank you, John. Secondly, one of the residents is concerned about the road infrastructure in the area and that it is simply inadequate for the extra increase of traffic associated with this development. The proposal within the report includes adding another junction very close to the Bisburn Road junction. And my resident, Mr. Davies, is concerned that the increase in traffic will result in even more near misses at this junction and more speeding along Faraday Way, which other residents have reported to me also. Mr. Davies has also concerns about the hedgerow that runs along the north boundary and behind Bordeaux Crescent. It is stated in the report dated 18th of May 2021 that the average height of this hedge is 1.5 metres, but Mr. Davies has stated that the actual height of the hedgerow from 47 Champagne Avenue to 11 Bordeaux Crescent is at least 2.5 metres above the 2-metre fence that runs along the boundary. Using average height of 1.5 metres is disingenuous when the most significant section of the hedgerow is more than 4 metres. Mr. Davis also states that the proposed compensatory planting does little to address the loss of the hedge on the northern border. It is a major factor to the bordering residents who have benefited from it for 2 decades, and Mr. Davis suggests that a border of at least 2 metres should be agreed through condition, a suggestion I agree with. Mr. Davis is also concerned that there is no report on current CO2 levels, as well as other pollutants from current traffic volumes or any future forecasting following the completion of all the other housing developments in the area. Also, there is no report or detailed considerations on the effect of the disruption to the development will cause residents. How will the residents be protected from issues such as noise pollution, etc., etc.? In addition to the concerns of the residents, myself and my fellow ward councillor, Councillor Cross, have huge concerns about the position of the affordable housing within the development. As stated in the report, there will be 16 houses which will be affordable and they will be accessed via Ricecar Way. All these houses will be placed in one corner of the development, and this is unacceptable to us. We have met twice with the developers prior to the planning application going in, and we expressed our concerns that the residents of the affordable housing will be segregated from the other residents of the development. We requested that the developers change the site of the affordable housing and mix with the rest of the development to be more inclusive. The developers claimed, and it has done tonight, that if the houses were situated together, then it would be easier for the housing association to manage these properties. This is not an acceptable reason for the segregation of our future residents. We are aware that this segregation of affordable housing is common practice within the building industry, and there have been several media reports over the years about this disgusting system. On a personal note, I too have experience of this awful procedure and the stigma that follows. And we as ward councillors do not want any of our future residents to feel stigmatised, isolated or shamed because they are unable to afford the more expensive properties on this development. It is an abhorrent practice we should not be allowing in Blackpool, and for that reason and the concerns of the residents we represent, we ask the committee to reject this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Farrell, for that. Certainly well thought out messages for the council, for the committee. I'm going to open it up to members now to discuss this, reminding you again that whilst it is owned by the council, and in the days of issues of transparency and questions of interest, I think we do repeat, as Susan just said, that the fact that the council would derive some benefit from the sale and development of this land isn't an issue when we're considering the planning merits of the application. Does anybody want to contribute? Councillor Stansfield.
Thank you very much, Chair. During Claire's initial presentation, she said that some of the properties did fall short of the surface areas that our requirements are. Yet we've got from Mr Booth telling us that all these are very generous area properties that meet with our regulations. Well, obviously, either they haven't been measured right by Mr Booth, or who's reading the figures wrong as to what these areas are, or by ourselves. And I don't think we will have got it wrong, because we use these every time. So it looks like now the affordable properties won't meet, or don't meet, our regulation minimum size, which I'm not happy with. If they don't meet the size, let's reduce the number of properties and let's get them so they are adequate homes for what we require. And yet again, we have got an application for numerous properties with very little green. Green energy, electrical points for future-proofing the site. It seems to be that every one of these applications that comes through with large amounts of properties seems to slip through, and we don't have any regulation or any say in whether or not we have climate control over it. And again, it's something which I'm not very happy about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. Chairman.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of what Councillor Stansfield has said. I'm just querying this 150,000 that I'm looking at here that we're not going to ask for. I know it says it's an unacceptable as a planning obligation, but so many of these developers are getting away with money that's an asset to the community that I'm really worried about things like this, and that adds to a lot of the things that Councillor Farrell and Councillor Stansfield have brought to our attention.
I think, Councillor Danny, you're representing your colleague Councillor Baker, standing in for him. Yeah.
I am, Chair. Thank you. Yeah. Just a couple of notes that I jotted down. I totally agree with Councillor Stansfield about the green area. It's totally been taken out. A little bit worried about that. I was also concerned about the hedgerows being removed. Do we know when they are going to be removed? Is there a particular time scale for that? Is it going to be affecting any wildlife over the breeding period? And I think 51 homes squeezed into that area is just a couple too many for my liking. For the simple reason that looking at the map on Google Maps, there only seems to be one road out of there, and that is on Rise Car itself. We have an estate just as, I think it's the south of that, of the home, which quite a few houses there. We're going to put another 51 in just above the home, with that one little way out of that dangerous roundabout area, which needs looking at as well before anything is okay, I would think. Because as far as I can note, that there is no entrance or exit on the Faraday way for any traffic to ease the problem of the congestion in the area once these houses are built. Just an observation. Thank you.
Well, we can only take advice from our traffic experts, people who are paid to understand traffic movements and risks to users. And you heard that the County Council highways people and our own think that the measures taken and the conditions are such that it will safeguard amenity and that it will not produce traffic hazards. Who do we believe? A fear or realities of expert opinion? Susan? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Chair, I was just going to say exactly the same as Councillor Scott. everybody's been talking about the problems with transport, everybody that's come on here tonight. And I think the transport issue on that road, and where the gentleman was saying it's a dangerous junction, flying traffic round that bend, if it's a bend or whatever, I think that is a serious problem. And the whole junction looks looking at. Okay.
Well, you did hear them saying, talking about traffic calming measures and the rest of stuff. I mean, I don't know to what extent our suspicions, our fears are balanced out by traffic expertise. I mean, we rely on traffic management measures throughout the town. It's a new residential development. People that are living there are bound to have concerns about a new development on their doorstep. But we've obviously got to take an objective view to benefit the community as a whole.
Yeah, just briefly on the traffic issue, it does appear that we are now have an application before us, and now we're going to look at possibly the traffic implications of it, with possible traffic calming measures coming in. This should really have been done prior to this application being here, and then we would have had the information as to whether it is safe. What we do have to bear in mind is that experts don't always get it right. It was experts that built the Titanic.
If I may, Chair, I was just going to say that there's only one entrance and one exit for this development. Now, you're going to have properties with 4 cars on them, 3 cars, 2 cars. If you add them all up, you've got that amount of traffic extra in that area. I think the highway should need to have a look at that, the amount of traffic that is actually going to be going in and out of that development. Thank you.
Vice Chairman, Councillor O'Hara.
It's been separated, isn't it? The 16 going to be in one plot with one exit, and the rest are all going to come out onto Faraday Way. I was just wondering, with Councillor Farrell's suggestion, that they mix the houses up rather than have all the cheap houses, if you want to call them that, in one spot. Presume that would decrease the number of properties that could go in the smaller development side of it. I just want to query that one, because that wouldn't be as much traffic, would it? They couldn't get the same number of houses as they could with the smallest development.
Do you want to come in, Susan?
Thank you, Chair. I've been trying to make a list of the points that everybody's been raising. If I try and go through them in order. Councillor Farrell raised the issue of drainage, and obviously from the photographs it's clear that there are some drainage issues on the site. There have obviously the drainage proposals, and the existing situation has been considered by the council's drainage officer. I think one thing we do need to be mindful of is that where you have a field that has no drainage in it, particularly on the Fylde coast where a lot of our soils are underlain by clay, natural fields don't have drainage and the water does pool because there is no mechanism for infiltration or storage of floodwaters. When you have a development like this that is actually building in a proper drainage strategy, attenuation, water holding tanks, you can find that the drainage situation does improve post-development, which seems counterintuitive. But that can be an outcome, and obviously the conditions proposed do require the agreement of a drainage strategy and a drainage management plan, and our drainage officers haven't raised any objection to it. The second issue I picked up on was air quality. In terms of CO2, I think it was from vehicle numbers. The area isn't in an air quality management area, it's not close to an air quality management area, and also the scale of development wouldn't trigger the environmental impact assessment regulations under which things like climate change and so on would be considered. So I don't think realistically we could defend any kind of refusal on air quality. Obviously the hedgerow has been discussed by Claire. In terms of the affordable housing segregation, that was an issue raised by Councillor Farrell and Councillor O'Hara. I absolutely agree that ordinarily and in policy we would seek for affordable housing to be pepper potted, What we know from the registered providers is that they do prefer the accommodation to be clustered. Now, obviously, in Blackpool, we don't have huge housing sites where you're getting 200, 300, 400 houses as you do on neighbouring boroughs of Wyre and Fylde and across Lancashire, in which case you will have little clusters of affordable housing throughout an estate. So on something like this, where we're only looking at 51 houses, we do have 16 in a cluster, and it looks as if they're very concentrated. And I suppose the balance that we have to consider is whether an affordable housing provider would decline to take on houses if they were truly spaced, pepper-potted amongst the site. And I've been aware of applications, not in Blackpool, but in the past, where the developer has really struggled to get an RP on board because they weren't happy with the dispersal of affordable housing properties. So obviously we've got the policy that's saying one thing and requiring one thing, but then we have the commercial realities and the pressure and the comments that we're getting from the affordable housing providers. Councillor Stansfield, you made a comment about the housing falling short of standards. I think that might refer to the fact that some of the properties don't meet the national housing technical standards. However, our policies don't require compliance with those standards, and even moving forward into part 2, which is our emerging policies coming through, I think the requirement is only that 20% of properties meet those standards, and that's been guided by the viability appraisal. So that's why it sounds like a contradiction. They're not meeting the national standards, but we actually can't make them do that because they're new build housing. So it is a frustration, I appreciate, but we've not got that policy foundation to require it. Again, green energy, at the moment we don't have a planning policy that would require them to do that or to explore those options. We will do in the future, but it's not in place yet. There is a policy, there is a condition proposed that would secure electric vehicle charging points, so that is in there. Councillor O'Hara, you mentioned the 150,000 contribution to the NHS. What we are seeing, to try and explain, far too long for me to try and explain in detail, but we're seeing contribution requests from the CCG, which essentially manages your doctor's surgeries, and from the Teaching Trust, which is Victoria Hospital. They've provided their information, what they're wanting the money for and how they've calculated it, whereas the requests from the CCG, the ones who control the doctor's surgery, are compliant with SIL legislation and planning legislation regarding obligations. The ones that we're seeing from the NHS, they're not meeting those minimum legal tests, and that's the reason that we don't feel that we can support them. We have advised the Teaching Hospital Trust of the problems with what they're asking for and why we have those concerns, and they've never engaged with us to try and overcome those. So that's why we don't feel that we can move forward with those requests for contributions. Councillor Scott, you mentioned the hedgerows, when they would be removed and would it affect wildlife. As standard, we put a condition on that prevents hedgerow and vegetation clearance during the main bird nesting season, so they will be protected. As far as I understand it, and I'm sure Latif will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, I think both the access points from Ricecar Way and Faraday Way are in and out. So I don't think it's a case that you go in on Faraday and come out on Ricecar. I don't know if I maybe misunderstood the comment that was made on that. Councillor Robertson, you mentioned the transport again in the dangerous junction. As I say, we could put a condition on to require traffic speed surveys to be undertaken and potential traffic calming to be agreed. Councillor Stansfield, you requested that should have been done before now. I take that on board. I suppose we're in the situation we're in now. We can put the condition on if you want to, or well, it's for you to make the decision really how you want to proceed. The comment about traffic from multi-car households, they don't just look at, when they do a transport assessment and transport statement, they don't just look at the number of houses, they do look at the number of bedrooms in those houses, and they work out the number of cars that would be expected. So they do take that into account when they work out vehicle movements, traffic generation and impact on highway safety. Thank you, Chair. I think that's everything.
Thank you, Susan, for that. I do remind colleagues that there are a raft of conditions, 35 of them, and I think 4 or 5 of them refer specifically to the issues of drainage. So it's not as if these issues have not been taken into account, and despite Councillor Farrell's photographs, however moving they might be, they can't reflect what will happen if the development takes place. I think it's good to scream before you're hurt, but I think those issues, they're common to any major development. Fields do attract water when it rains. You get ponding effects, some of them very deep indeed, but obviously you're not going to build on land without satisfactorily draining it. And I think the conditions, you're satisfied as head of our planning development, that an awful lot of work goes into negotiating these major applications. And I think, you know, at times, listen to what's been said, and I'm quite sure that that traffic mitigation, I think, will add that as a 36th condition. It's been volunteered by our planning, by our transport people, and as Councillor Stansfield says, it might have been in the list already, but there's no reason why we can't add it if a committee is minded to approve it with that additional condition, which makes sense. Anybody else wish to contribute? Yeah, Councillor Danny Scott.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with the amount of traffic that's going to be around this roundabout, we have spoken about it briefly, but I've just worked out very, very roughly that that little estate just below the Bisping Gardens, there's about 55 to 60 houses there. We're going to have another additional 50 houses. So we could have anywhere up to about 160 cars at any time coming in and out of Rise Car Way, because there's no other way out at this moment in time. And I'm just worried, with the cars already going to be there, on top of that with visitors coming in, I take the point of the lady on there about that corner at the roundabout. With the amount of traffic being added to it, it increases any possibility of accidents happening. I was wondering if it's possible to put down and have a look to see if, no matter who's responsible for it, whether that corner could be less of a curve and more of a right angle to stop the traffic from just speeding round, if this has been going to be passed, because there'll be a lot of traffic coming around that little roundabout. Just an observation. Can that be looked at?
Yes, Chair. Just having a look at the plans, as I read it, you've only got the 14 houses that would be accessible from Rise Car Way. The two sections of the site, they have a pedestrian link through, but I don't think that's a vehicle link, so I don't think the houses in the northern section of the site could drive through and egress onto Rise Car. Absolutely, in terms of the traffic calming, if we did a speed survey required by condition, then absolutely traffic calming measures or modifications to the road could be secured through that. The one thing I would say, and again I think perhaps Latif will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, I understand what the residents are saying about that blind corner, and obviously because it's a curve people come round at speed. I think there would be an element where if you are coming out of Tennyson Drive Estate and you can actually see houses and driveways and parked cars, the character of the road would change. It would feel more residential. That at the moment, the two properties that front onto Rice Car Way, that they're not visible as you egress. But if you are seeing houses, your driving manner will change because you will read the road differently. I don't know whether Latif wants to comment on that, whether that is a reasonable assumption on my part. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. It is reasonable. In terms of the layout geometry of Rice Car Way, obviously it was a development that was built nearly 15 years ago, maybe slightly earlier. But I appreciate, obviously, with additional development that the dynamics of the street could change. What I will say is, as part of any off-site works that is conditioned, we would expect the applicant and his agents to look at the visibility around, obviously, certain points along the existing road to determine whether there is actually an issue with speeding, visibility, and other highway matters that would be considered as part of a detailed design package.
Yeah, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if it has been monitored, that area, and if not, could it possibly be monitored for a period of time to see if there is any major problems with speeding?
I think that's what the suggestion would be of the condition, that we actually condition that the applicant undertake speed surveys, and depending on what the results of those speed surveys show, we would then agree with them a scheme of highway modification or speed management measures on the roadway. So I think that's what the condition would be securing for you.
Through you, Chair. Typically, we would put speeding equipment out for a minimum of 2 weeks, which is the accepted norm, obviously, in trying to get decent results. So 2 weeks, in my view, is acceptable to actually gather information in relation to the volume of traffic, the speed of traffic, and classification of vehicles as well.
Thanks, Mr. Patel. Have we exhausted the discussion? Do we know what we're doing? Councillor Hunter, deputising.
Yes, good evening. Deputising for Councillor Farrell. I'm not familiar with this particular committee, but I have sat in on a few planning committees in the past as a substitute. But looking at the issues raised by Councillor Stansfield, Councillor Scott behind me, and Councillor Farrell, which are all real issues as I see it, and to me I think they are issues as to why we shouldn't really approve this this application today. I've absolutely no doubt that the professionals concerned will, you know, in placing various conditions on approval, put various measures in place to allay the fears expressed tonight. But then, once that is done, once that is undertaken, it's not going to come back to this committee, is it? It's going to be over to the officers to make the decision. So particularly, and it's particularly with respect to the thing that Councillor Stansfield raised, I think that these things should be done, should be taken care of, should be monitored, and then they should come back with the application to this committee. That's just my view on the situation, Chair.
Chairman, in response, if committee would feel more comfortable, rather than making a decision this evening, you could vote to defer the application to enable this monitoring of speeds to be done and a scheme of highway works to be drawn up that obviously our highways officers could consider and indicate their approval of or otherwise. And then we could bring it back before committee either in December meeting. We might not be able to make the December meeting, it might be January. You know, given the lead-in times, but if committee would be more comfortable with that, we could do that rather than make a decision this evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Stansfield.
Chair, I would be more comfortable with the results of that survey prior to making the decision. Thank you.
Okay. Right, I think we'll defer it. I get the sense of feeling of the committee. Yeah. Would somebody move that we defer a decision? Right, it's moved and seconded. I think it's a fairly unanimous agreement that, yeah, so it'd be deferred to a future meeting. Thank you very much. Sorry? I don't know whether we should have a vote on that. Break. I think that's the expression, but we shall be returned very, very shortly. It's item 10. We're turning our attention to 124 Norbreck Road. The application here for use of the premises as a residential care home. It is in fact recommended for refusal. I'm going to ask Susan if she'd like to come in and introduce it for us.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the application relates to number 124 Norbreck Road, which is a two-storey semi-detached property. It's before committee at the request of the local ward councillor, and the recommendation is for refusal. Members may remember that this property has been before committee a couple of times. Initially it was recommended for approval and members resolved to support its use as a children's home. And then whilst the Section 106 agreement was being prepared, the council obtained additional legal advice, and because the property falls within 400 metres of a semi-independent living facility for young people, the application was brought back to committee and refused on the basis of conflict with policy BH24 of the local plan. The current application seeks to use the property as a care home, but this time for 2 adults. As the use would serve adults rather than children, it is not considered to be similar to the existing facility within 400 metres, and so there is deemed to be no locational conflict with policy BH24. The information submitted with the application states that 3 teams of carers would operate on site with shift changeovers at 11 p.m. and 8 a.m, and a manager would be on site 8 a.m. to 4 p.m, and no amenity issues are identified. The key issue is that of need. The Council's Children, Adult and Family Services team has confirmed that there is currently no need in Blackpool for the type of accommodation proposed. Policy BH24 of the local plan makes it clear that community care residential uses will only be permitted where there is a demonstration of local need. And in the absence of a confirmed need, it is likely that residents will be placed from outside of the borough, which would increase pressure on local services, which would compromise the ability of those services to meet the needs of the local community. Otherwise, no unacceptable issues relating to amenity, visual impact, highway safety, drainage, ecology or environmental quality have been identified. It is recognised that the use would generate some employment opportunities, but this is not considered to be of sufficient benefit to outweigh the conflict with policy and the potential impact on local service provision. As such, and on balance, the scheme is not considered to represent sustainable development, and members are respectfully recommended to refuse the application for the reasons stated at the end of the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have the applicant, Mr. Daniel Lee, wishes to address us. So it's over to you, Mr. Lee. Come in now.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. Good evening, all. I'll be addressing points of argument directly from the officer's report, and as per last time, please do excuse my fast speaking on account of the 7-minute time frame. Now, firstly, I do want to address 2 or 3 important points from later on in the document. Point 0, point 5.1, and I quote directly, "At this point in time, limited weight can be attached to the policies proposed. Nevertheless, following draft policies in part 2 are most relevant to this application. DM3, supported accommodation and housing for older people," end quote. So from our perspective, even in the reporting officer conceding, and I quote, "limited weight in policy applicable to this application," I have personally appraised the solely quoted DM3 in its entirety. And given the chance to have discourse, there isn't a point within the document or any other local policy or document to my knowledge in which we aren't justified in receiving approval for our application. So quite simply, I just request that the committee utilise this information as key when deciding today, and not on unfounded sentiment of some of the opposing arguments. Now, the point that Paul Maynard makes about the Abbeyfields home is, again, as far as I see, predicated purely on opinion, and he fails to provide support in the form of legislation or policy. As suggested by the previous point, it doesn't exist. Further, we have addressed and fallen foul, albeit in our opinion unfairly, of judgments in this area previously. So if this point is to be factored into today's decision-making process, I would request just policy-based evidence. Paul Maynard's second to last point is, it is clear that this is not meeting local needs, but to attract outside placements. At best, this is speculative, teetering on corrupting our character, especially so when considering that our promise is to legally give up any right to do so via signing the S106. Returning to cascading order, in point 1.2, the author inexplicably fails to provide reason for why we wouldn't add to the community, leaving no alternative other than to discount the statement as unjustified opinion. Point 2.1 also references a lack of need for such a provision, which is, again, as far as I see, purely speculative in its lack of supporting evidence. Our documented exchanges with Blackpool Council have led us to believe differently, and I will substantiate those further in a statement whilst addressing point 8.1 in due course. Point 2.2 speaks of development and is once again nondescript and vague at best. The home is adequate in every capacity. However, if the author would like to be a bit more specific, I'm happy to enter into live discourse on the matter today if appropriate. The officer's report detailed inaccuracies in its notes on previous application committees of ours. The previous application 200219 was not refused as stated in the report, but rather postponed to a further meeting. And in regard to following committees, we didn't withdraw as stated, but rather saw ourselves awarded permission only to have it retracted. A supporting committee meeting saw another voting decision conclude in our favour, albeit the published records don't portray this. A cursory viewing of the YouTube link for the previous committee we attended will quite simply show the committee chair both open and receive a voting conclusion, landing in our favour, and rather than concluding the matter at that stage, proceed to further deliberate on the pros and cons of our application himself, in addition to providing further additional narrative of his own, which ultimately swayed opinion. So at which stage he initiated a reopening of the voting process, a process we and others watching had already saw take place and conclude. Our position was overturned. Whilst we noticed this at the time and were naturally disgruntled and with supporting publicly available evidence, we said nothing. We said nothing on account of a strong desire not to muddy any waters with this committee, and this is still our desire. No matter our intention, however, we trust a similar occurrence won't transpire today. Equally, Councillor Julie Sloman is slated to speak during this hearing, and as far as we're concerned, as we understand at the minute, this could represent what could be fairly construed as a conflict of interest. Mrs. Sloman has registered a point of interest as either living with or being espoused to a Lawrence Sloman, lead practitioner at Sandcastle Care. Now, we're also led to believe that Miss Sloman herself may currently or have previously been in paid or unpaid service to Sandcastle Care. I categorically stress, however, though, that this last point is merely a possibility put to us, and I do have nothing to substantiate that as fact. Whilst we sincerely have zero animosity towards Sandcastle Care, it should be noted they're an organisation who provides services identical to that of our own and have had the same category of application as ourselves put before this very committee, even whilst our own applications for this property have been open. Therefore, it's surely inappropriate for any individual with such significant links to an organisation so closely aligned to ourselves and in such close proximity to provide any input on an application of our own. In regard to point 8.1, the paragraph summary describes a lack of need for such a provision. Please note carefully that our decision to continue our occupancy in this property and to render this application was at the very request of Blackpool Services and in full relation to an existing placement for which they wanted transitional adult care from ourselves. This statement is backed by a comprehensive catalogue of exchanges between both organisations. Point 8.1 also references an adult service not being registered on our part. It's important that I provide further context here. CQC were in full correspondence with our service lead and the DBS process was completed. We were informed and remain in a current state of flux that we require planning permission, hence where we are today. 8.3 references a potential need for a noise assessment, which we're happy to facilitate. And 9.6, in regards to Paul Maynard's comments, I've addressed BH24 and its applicability to children's, not adult services. The application of the previous point of rule is irrelevant here. In addition, out-of-borough placements are covered by the Council's S106 form. Mr. Maynard also references a risk of outbound care circumventing planning processes to reach what he called our previous stated aim. Let me quell this notion by saying we would be happy to sign any document legally prohibiting us, such as the similar to the 106, from stopping us to do this. It's not in our interest. It was also mentioned about the property being rented. We meet with all prerequisites of governing bodies in the duration of our lease. For the benefit of the committee, who are hearing these points for the third time now, I've already addressed issues regarding high risk or challenging behaviours, possibilities surrounding noise and elderly neighbours being nearby as judgment before a fact, and request their being discounted accordingly. Furthermore, in none of these points do we propose the breaking of any laws, but more so are in full compliance with all things. We have also expressed willingness to meet non-lawfully required desires of local neighbours. So that's quite simply ridiculous. Referencing the property as being poorly kept. This is in actual fact just a garden, which we do concede has become overgrown. It's worth noting, however, that the property has now been unoccupied for well over 2 years, and as such, if active, will be as immaculate as any of our other homes. It's worthy of ironic note, however, having Paul Maynard having made that complaint when he himself both can and has attested to being impressed by the standard of our homes, having personally visited one of our provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. You've had your allocated time. We've given you warning to come to the end of your address.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was Daniel Lee, the applicant, and now the two ward councillors are going to have their turn, starting with Councillor Maxine Callow. Come in, Maxine. We can't hear you. Are you muted?
I'm not muted now, Chairman, I don't think.
Go ahead.
Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loudly and clearly.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that little hiccup. Once again, thank you for allowing me to speak. 124 Norbrake Road has rumbled on for almost 2 years. And as you know full well, it's not the first time that I have represented the residents of the area. In the report, there were some excellent reasons for refusal, but they were pointed out very well indeed, in my opinion. But one that wasn't covered was fear. And I believe, Chairman, that an application can be turned down on fear. I will now explain my position. I understand that the property is on a 5-year lease to the applicants. And during the past years, this has not, in my opinion, they have not maintained it. They've let the garden be overgrown to a terrible state. The shed during the summer months was used for somebody sleeping because the property appeared empty for anybody walking past. And how do we know, Chairman, that if the property was allowed to have planning permission, would they maintain it if given this permission? This is something that concerns me, that they've actually owned it for a number of years on a lease and have not maintained it. The property was not built for the proposed use. The neighbours have not been considered at all in this. The applicant hasn't even gone halfway into meeting the residents of the area and trying to explain the situation. They feel that they have been ignored. Chairman, I would hope that the committee would go along with the officer's recommendation. And as I pointed out before, permission can be refused on fear. And the fear is that the residents' lives would be disrupted by a scheme totally out of character of the area and one that is not needed. And perhaps it doesn't come under planning, but I do think that we should feel some sympathy for the residents of this area who are on most of them are over pension age, and for almost 2 years they have had their lives put on hold. Once again, Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Callow. And now it's Councillor Julie Sloman's turn. Councillor Sloman.
She's still on mute. Can you take me off?
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee. I would like to try and just say to Mr. Lee, I am not involved in any way, shape or form with Sandcastle Care. I actually left my employment with them on the 31st of May. My husband, Lawrence, actually works now for Lancashire County Council. He is in no way, shape or form connected with Sandcastle Care. Sandcastle Care actually do provide residential children's services. You're proposing actually to provide a care facility for adults, so less of a conflict there. And I would point out I'm a democratically elected member of the council, and I'm here to represent the interests of the people in my ward and nothing else. I think Maxine Callow's submission has more or less covered everything that I was going to raise. What I would say, and I do think is extremely important, although you know, I understand Mr. Lee takes issue with it. Josh McAllister recently has produced a report for this Competitions and Marketing Authority, which actually in respect of residential children's services, and one of the recommendations is to actually open up the market for new competition. And one of the ways of doing that potentially would be to reduce regulation and to reduce planning applications, which would make it very easy for this this application to basically be evolved into being a children's service. And in the words of a constituent, this has been a sword of Damocles hanging over us for the last 2 years. And it just feels like because they've committed to the lease, they will keep applying until the council just relents. Normally applications to register services, be they with CQC as this one would be, or for a children's home it would be Ofsted, there would normally be a statement of purpose that would be put in the pack. I would have expected to see a statement of purpose potentially to go in with this, because it's a very broad church by saying adults over the age of 18. It doesn't say particularly what their needs could be, the challenges, physically challenging behaviour, noise. You know, could these be adults who've got sexually harmful behaviour? It's a very, very broad church. And on the basis of Maxine Callow's submission, what Paul Maynard's had to say, and the views of the residents and the officers who have said that this should be refused, and the fact that we've also gone out to adult social care who are saying there is absolute sufficiency in the area, I respectfully request that the committee hears our collective voices and refuses this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sloman. I remind committee that the recommendation is for refusal based on 2 reasons, which are obviously our policy strategy in this particular field. And it's a clear breach of our emerging policy in this area. And would anybody... Do you want... Susan Parker to come in with a couple of issues.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify a couple of points before you move to the debate, if that's okay. Mr. Lee raised the issue of emerging policy DM3 and the limited weight that can be attached to it. It's very standard practice in an officer report to talk about what is adopted planning policy, but also what emerging planning policy is coming through and is relevant. But obviously we do acknowledge that limited weight can be attached to DM3, and if members note, the reason for refusal doesn't quote DM3, it is based on BH24, which is a long adopted policy and forms part of the development plan. I can't comment on the comments raised about the previous decision. The comment about need and the potential to sign a Section 106 agreement. A Section 106 agreement would be a route that we could go down if the application otherwise met policy and it was a case of us controlling who went in there. Because our colleagues in children and adults and family services are telling us that there is no need for this use, it would be inappropriate for us to try and condition through a Section 106 that the property be occupied by only local people when our council colleagues are telling us that there is no local need for this provision. I accept what he says that there has been dialogue with that service, and you know, we have to take the comments that they've put to us. Councillor Callow raised the issue of fear. Fear of crime or fear of a development proposal can be a reason to refuse planning permission, but only when there is a substantiated expectation of that fear materialising. So the fear of whatever is going to happen, there has to be a justified reason behind it. The one thing I would say that within the care sector, the whole movement of that sector, and I think the government's ambitions, is to try and get care within residential areas rather than institutionalised. It is more into family homes where people are cared for in a far more typical domestic environment, and of course that does bring these uses into our neighbourhoods. And we have seen previous appeal decisions where inspectors have dismissed concerns of fear, where a use is supported by a proper management plan. Inspectors have said that there is no justifiable reason to fear the kind of use. I'd also make the comment that the condition of the garden, any squatting that has taken place, that's not a material planning consideration in terms of the assessment of this proposal. We have to look at it in isolation and on its own merits. In terms of it being out of the character of the area, as I say, that is what the government is moving towards. Councillor Sloman mentioned concern over the kind of adults that would be accommodated. That would be something that colleagues in Children, Adult and Family Services would control in terms of who they place in the property. So the fact that they are saying there is no need for this use, obviously we have to take that on board. But also it wouldn't be a case of, as planners, we could control who was put in there. It would be a case of agreeing an appropriate management plan for the use that was proposed. So I just wanted to clarify those points. Thank you, Chair.
It's recommended for refusal for the reasons given, and you've had our Chief Planning Officer explaining why the application is completely outside our policy. Would somebody like to move refusal? Vice Chairman, seconded by yes. Councillor Jones, yeah. Sorry. It is seconded, yeah. Thanks very much. Those in favour of refusal, please show. That is a unanimous decision. Thank you for that. Right. Can we now turn our attention to planning application number 11 on the agenda, the hotel development proposed for 26 to 30 Abingdon Street. Beside the application itself for full planning permission, side by side, we've got the application for listed building consent for the development. Are you going to introduce it?
No, it's Claire.
Leaving it for Claire.
Yeah.
Coming, Claire.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, it's a full planning application and a listed building consent application for the former post office building on Avenue Street and the sorting office on Edward Street. I'll present both applications at the same time, but would ask members to vote on each application separately. The site's bounded by telephone exchange, retail units and Deansgate to the north, with Abingdon Street Market to the south. There are a number of listed buildings within the setting of the site, including the 8 telephone boxes in front of the post office, St John's Church and the Winter Gardens. And then there's Abingdon Street Market and the Cedar Tavern on Edward Street, which are both locally listed. Both the post office and the sorting office are within the town centre and the town centre conservation area. The 3-storey former post office building is Grade 2 listed, and the former sorting office is within its curtilage and has 4 storeys and a rooftop extension. The post office closed in 2007, with the post office building subsequently being used for parcel collections only until the sorting office relocated to Bispham in 2015. The buildings have stood empty and boarded up since and have been a target for vandalism. There have been various planning applications approved since 2016, including hotel, retail and leisure development. The most recent approval in 2019 was for various extensions and alterations and use of the former post office building for retail and leisure, and the sorting office as a 102-bedroom hotel with ancillary facilities. The proposals before members this evening include a 3-storey extension in the central courtyard, which would form accommodation linking the post office and the sorting office buildings, a replacement 4th floor roof extension and balconies to the former sorting office, a single-storey extension and 3-storey stair core extension to the former post office within the courtyard, internal and external alterations following demolition of various internal walls and structures, and use of the building as a hotel with 148 bedrooms, with ancillary facilities and car park access from Edward Street and servicing from Queen Beatrice Road. The principle of hotel developments has been established through the granting of previous planning permissions, but in any case, new hotel development with a town centre accords with local and national policies in principle. A hotel of this scale would result in a wide range of employment opportunities all year round and would support other businesses and attractions in Blackpool. Bringing these buildings back into use would be one of many regeneration projects in and around the town centre and would assist in the rebranding of the town centre. In terms of the extensions and alterations proposed, the frontage of the former post office will be largely untouched other than the removal of some roof lights, window and stonework repairs, a condition requiring the submission of a survey detailing any repair work and a methodology for cleaning the Portland stone would ensure that the frontage retains its architectural merit, its historical significance and its positive contribution to the town centre conservation area. An existing stair core and single-storey rear extension will be demolished to the rear of the former post office building to make way for the three-storey contemporary extension, which would link through to the sorting office and provide an attractive setting for a new courtyard seating area. Another stair core and single-storey extension to the former post office building has already been removed by the previous owner, leaving parts of the building open to the elements and in a state of disrepair. The demolished stair core would be reinstated along with a single-storey rear extension to form a toilet block. The existing flat roof extension to the former sorting office covers approximately 3/4 of the roof. It's poorly designed and it doesn't relate well to the host building. The replacement flat roof extension would cover the full width of the sorting office. It would have a high degree of symmetry and the window arrangements would align with the strongly ordered fenestration of the lower floors fronting Edward Street. It would be approximately 1.5 metres higher than the existing roof extension, but set back behind the front parapet by about 1.3 metres. A condition requiring the railings on Edward Street requires the railings on Edward Street to be repaired and repainted. However, as detailed in the update note, the agent has suggested that the railings are beyond economic repair. As such, that condition has been amended to allow for replacement railings to be agreed. Internally, the counter in the former post office main hall would be removed and reused in the ground floor bar, and cornicing will be retained and repaired, and further details of internal works will be agreed by condition. It's considered that, subject to conditions, the extensions and alterations proposed will preserve and enhance the appearance and significance of the designated heritage assets and is fully supported by Historic England, the Council's Built Heritage Advisor and the Civic Trust. In terms of amenity, the replacement fourth storey on the sorting office will be slightly larger than the existing structure. However, it's not considered that this would adversely impact on the amenities of occupiers of Edward Street. No other element of the proposals would impact on residential amenity. The hotel itself would have a mix of suites and ensuite rooms, an ancillary bar, restaurant, gym, and associated back-of-house facilities. It's considered that the proposal would result in a good quality holiday accommodation, which will provide a good standard of amenity to guests. The courtyard would provide a landscape space and seating area, a pick-up and drop-off points, and 12 parking spaces, 6 of which will be accessible. There would also be spaces for 20 bicycles, 5 motorbikes, and opportunities for charging vehicles. The transport statement confirms that the car parking spaces will primarily serve guests with greater mobility requirements, whilst other guests will be required to make use of the town centre car parks, should they choose to drive, as is the case for the Ibis and the Premier Inn at Talbot Square. The site is highly accessible by public transport, and the draft travel plan encourages walking, cycling, and promotes the use of public transport. Given the town centre is highly accessible, and given the constraints of the site, the car parking provision is considered to be acceptable. The applications have been reviewed by the Head of Highways and Traffic Management, and no concerns have been raised, subject to conditions. In terms of sustainability, the design and access statement confirms that a range of measures will be investigated to make the buildings as efficient and sustainable as possible, such as by including solar panels on the former sorting office roof, insulation, the use of air source heat pumps, rainwater recycling, etc. And these details will be agreed as part of a sustainability strategy by condition. Finally, moving on to ecology, the submitted bat survey highlights potential roosting features on the site and recommends further survey work to be undertaken to determine whether bats do use the site. We are currently out of bat season, and so further survey work cannot be undertaken until around May next year. We have sought advice from the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit on this matter, and we're still waiting a response. The Council therefore cannot make a decision on the application until the absence of bats have been confirmed. As such, members are respectively recommended to resolve to support the applications for full planning permission and listed building consent, but defer determination to the Head of Development Management to issue this decision notice once the absence of bats has been confirmed. Should bats be present on the site, the applications will be brought back to committee along with the ecological recommendation and any mitigation proposed.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. One issue that springs to mind is the condition of what was, of course, the banking hall in the building. Have we actually been inside it recently to know whether any damage has been done to the floor of that particular floor of the building? I think it was a terrazzo, was it mosaic floor, if memory serves, way back. What condition is it like inside?
Chair, I haven't been inside the post office. There is a structural report that accompanies the application with a full survey. There is quite significant water ingress damage through parts of the roofs are missing, the basement's filling up with water. Like I said, some extensions have already been removed and then just gaping holes have been left. So the building is in quite a sorry state. But yeah, in the main hall, the counter's still there. I'm not sure about the terrazzo floor, but all of these would be agreed by condition.
Has there been a change of ownership?
I'm not sure.
Thank you very much for that.
Sorry.
It's, do you want to, you're quite happy with that as the chief, yeah? Anybody want
Chair,
to
we do
comment?
have a speaker registered. We have Mr. White.
Sorry,
on the
I
item.
beg your pardon, yeah. We do have an objection, I'm reminded, from Mr. Ian White, and it's right and proper that he come in now to address us. Mr. White.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are not completely an objection. The submission I made was a neutral submission. We, as a hotelier, I appreciate that any large-scale development should be questioned, and I believe wholeheartedly that the restoration of such a significant heritage asset should be the primary concern. And on the impact, I have noted the statement of Mr. Alexander, who is a resident of Edward Street, and he has raised concerns about the impact on light, and I appreciate that the planning officer has referenced that there will be no negative impact from the increased height. There are significant concerns, however, that the businesses on Edward Street have already suffered a long period of building work as the street has been significantly upgraded, and should there be a better access point to the building site than Edward Street, and whether there is an alternative way of getting heavy machinery and large scale deliveries into the site without using Edward Street, and potentially undoing all the great work that has been done on there in recent years. The other issue, and I appreciate that a central town location offers a good access route from transport like trains and buses, but people still prefer to use cars. And yes, there is significant car parking spaces already within the nearby area, but we also got a new civil service hub in the same sort of area, which is one of the later planning applications. So is there really going to be an issue with car parking? Who knows? But also, are other businesses within, like myself, disadvantaged in the case where these new builds have got concessionary parking arrangements within? I know the Premier Inn has concessionary parking spaces within Talbot Road multi-storey car park. Oh, are the ordinary hoteliers expected to not make representations when unfair conditions are imposed on us by providing advantages for these new businesses? All I really want to say is the understanding that this is a heritage asset which has been significantly neglected for recent years is the overriding concern, and we appreciate that the application is no doubt going to be passed because of the restoration of such heritage asset. However, I would extend a welcoming hand to the team of the developers who have already met at a BBLG meeting to give us a chance to work together so that the impact on the holiday sector as a whole can be supported in a strong and positive way. And I extend the welcoming hand and would like to work with them to address some of the issues which are impacting on the whole of the holiday sector and the reputation that the holiday sector in Blackpool has got. There's been a great year, but there's been a lot of undermining factors, which I'm quite surprised that the national press haven't picked up on some of the conditions of the Blackpool hotels. But it's not just the small B&Bs; it's some of the bigger hotels as well. So the people doing the right thing need to work together, and I hope that the organisations running this hotel will work with us for the good of Blackpool. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. White, for that insight into the holiday industry. I do note, and I'm sure the committee have noted, that in broad terms you welcome the development as another offer in Blackpool's tourism trade. Not everybody will want to stay in Abingdon Street, no matter what kind of boutique hotel this turns out to be. But it's choice, and people sometimes prefer a bed and breakfast, and sometimes they want a luxurious holiday experience. But it's all there. It's what Blackpool has offered over the years, and I think our tourists are pretty discerning in what they like. And as you say, we wish them well, the developers. We hope it's a success. It'll be nice to see people using that building again, which has been sadly forlorn for far too many years. And it's had a checkered history in recent times with developers wanting to get the best out of it. And it rather looks as if this time the developer is serious in his intentions. Open it to debate. You've had Mr. White's reservations about it in some respects, not least with the impact on Edward Street, the car parking provision or lack of it, and his general anxiety about it, put it no higher than that. Anybody want to move approval? Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Danny Scott that we approve the application. It's seconded by Councillor Robertson that it be approved. Anybody dissent from that? Anybody wants to add a contribution? Do we want to comment on the conditions, are we happy with those? Councillor Stansfield.
Can I just comment generally over the application? Because I think it really is an application. It's about time something did happen with this site. Like I say, we have had many applications in the past. Various ones have started and little bits have been done, and now we've got a building which is in part disrepair. I do hope that the developers are as serious as what this application looks, and they do get on with the job, and we do get the building back to what it was. It just seems a shame that if it carries on much longer, we could lose one of our historic properties. I just wanted to pass that comment on.
Yeah. Thank you, I'm very pleased to see the roof is going. That I remember as a 16-year-old volunteering to be a postman that Christmas, and I was on that top floor, and if talk about sweated labour, everybody was down to the singlets and shorts. It was really so hot. So I've got not very happy memories of that building, but certainly there were lots of jewels. The banking hall was always a joy. The woodwork there, the floor, the windows, everything about it was quite majestic, and as a Crown property, you really felt that you know, the state meant something in the town. And I fear that the previous owners have not treated it as kindly as they might have done, and to hear that there's water ingress is very, very disappointing. But there it is. It's moved. Sorry, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's a perfect building to become a hotel, and the employment that will bring in to Blackpool as well, and the visitors. I think we've achieved something here. Thank you.
I think an important thing too, because we have so many hotels coming on stream, it encourages the others. If you're running a small hotel guest house, when you can see what's happening, I mean, clearly Blackpool has been in the doldrums for many years from the 60s, simply because we've had, and I remember addressing a Conservative Party conference some years ago, when John Major was Prime Minister, and I pointed out to the delegates that Blackpool had one of the highest proportions, highest percentages in the country of family-owned businesses, and it was their kind of town, and entrepreneurship and all the rest of it. But sadly, there hasn't been nearly enough investment in holiday accommodation, and I suppose it's been very encouraging that in recent times we've seen a great growth in new hotels, and I think it's making people feel that they've got to put some of their own if they're going to have any future. And so it must be worrying, and Mr. White spelt it out for us, as if we weren't aware of that it will have an impact on small businesses, on family concerns, but the salvation is in their own hands. If you don't make your premises attractive to tourists, they won't use you. It's a simple story, and it's not an easy one, but that's the way things are. People want quality. So it's moved and seconded. Nobody else wishes to speak? Oh, right. Councillor Scott.
Sorry, Chair, it's just an observation. The previous speaker, Mr. White, he's quite right in what he said about Edward Street. There's been a bit of work done there, and it looks a lot better than what it used to be. And we're looking forward to seeing this building enhancing Abingdon Street. I can't wait for it to be finished, because it will look superb. I have absolutely no doubt in Blackpool. But the only thing that I'm looking at now is Queen Feares Road. I don't know if there's any ownership on that road or whatever it is, but it looks absolutely dreadful. I have no idea if there's any plans for around that area concerning the hotel, the future building, what we are proposing. But that looks disgraceful, to be honest with you. It's the total opposite of what Edward Street now looks like. A nicely finished road, beautifully tarmacked and lined. Have you any indications what's going to happen to Queen Feares Road?
I remind everybody that there's a massive council investment going on in Abingdon Street Market, which is cheek by jowl. That's Queen Vera Road. The developer of this hotel wants people to patronise his establishment. The whole of the area, Edward Street, how much has the council spent on beautifying Edward Street? It's been a major part of our investment to make the town centre attractive for residents and visitors alike. And it beggars belief that they will not give attention to that little, the little road against it, because it's going to be their access port of entry, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
sorry, Joe, that was my point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody else? Can we proceed to the vote? Those in favour, please show.
Chair, we just need to do the vote in
Well,
two
it's yes. I'm
parts,
taking it.
please.
This is on the main application. Yes, please. Those please show. It is unanimous with some of the comments that I'm sure Councillor Scott has properly made. And then we've got the listed building application, which of course we're taking it alongside it. And I don't think we need to go into any further. I think Claire has spelt it all out for us. Are we happy to accept? Move it? Second it? That's the Vice Chairman and Councillor Stansfield. The vote, please. Those in favour, please show. Again, it's unanimous. Thank you very much for that. And finally, I think this is the biggest, is it? The biggest of the evening, certainly in size and capacity and everything else. It's one of the mega developments of recent times. Is that one for you, Susan? Do you want to give it to Claire?
No.
Susan Parker, please, to introduce it.
Thank you. I'll go for the grand finale. This is the Reserve Matters application for the third phase of the Talbot Gateway scheme. It's seeking to agree all matters, and that is access, layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. Members will recall that outline permission was granted by this committee in March of this year. Although the detailed information submitted at that time was only indicative, the scheme hasn't changed substantively. The building will be 7 stories high and would provide reception and back-of-house facilities at ground floor level along with the medical centre. The upper floors would be used as office accommodation, and it has now been confirmed that it will be occupied by DWP. Externally, the proposed site layout remains largely as indicated at outline stage, with a boulevard running through the site linking the junction of Cookson Street and Deansgate with King Street, and this would improve access between Blackpool North and the main body of the town centre. The area to the front of the former hop would be used as public open space with grassed areas and seating. As proposed at outline stage, a surface public car park would be created on the rear of, to the rear of the hop. The scale of the building would be within the parameters established at outline stage, but I would like to make members aware of an error in paragraph 11.3.1 of my report. The roof would be 31.2 metres high as stated, but there's actually a parapet proposed, and the height to the top of the parapet would be 31.8 metres. The design is strongly influenced by brutalist architecture and would follow a strong grid format. However, this will be broken up by use of vertical and horizontal bars of different widths and by use of dark grey cladding at sporadic intervals. Otherwise, the building would be clad in a terracotta coloured tile at upper floor level and a dark grey at ground floor level. It might actually be useful at this point if I show you share an artist's impression if I'm able to. Just so you can remember what was proposed. As set out in the assessment, it is unfortunate that some sections of the ground floor would present a blank frontage, but given the landscaping proposed and the overall quality of the building, this is considered to be acceptable. The building would not particularly reflect the form of those around it, but it is reasonable for a building of this scale to be of its own style to establish a new character in the street scene. The key consideration is therefore the quality of design, and on balance this building is considered to be a good design. As such, the building would not have a harmful impact on the setting, character or appearance of the nearby statutorily or locally listed buildings or the town centre conservation area. No objection has been raised on access grounds, but the detailed design of the necessary highway works associated with the scheme is ongoing. As such, members will note the intention to amend Condition 1, which lists the plan references, to remove the highway plans, and instead an additional condition, number 10, would be imposed to require the final details to be agreed through condition. It is also proposed that the wording of the condition as set out in the update note is amended slightly to require the details to be agreed prior to the commencement of highway works rather than above ground construction, and similar changes are proposed to conditions 2, 3 and 4. There has only been one objection to the application, and this relates to the principle of development rather than any of the reserved matters that are subject to consideration. And as such, members are respectfully recommended to grant reserved matters approval subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer report and in the update note and subject to the slight amendments that have been explained. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to bring in Mr. Ed Harvey, who's the agent for the applicant. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair said, my name is Ed Harvey. I'm the agent. The proposal is a reserved matters application following the grant of outline permission in March this year for a new office building and medical centre, also with the creation of new public realm. The principle of the development has already been established through the grant of outline permission. Key development parameters were also approved, including both the building footprint and the maximum allowed building height. The development of Talbot Gateway is a key regeneration priority, as we know, for the council. The principle of a new mixed-use development is established, and the proposed development accords with the council's regeneration ambitions for this area. The new office building will meet a current occupier demand and will generate significant economic benefits, not least by bringing large numbers of new workers into the town centre. It will also bring social benefits through the creation of a new medical centre. Now, the design of the scheme has been carefully considered and developed in accordance with the approved parameters. The form and appearance of the building draw upon the town's rich architectural heritage, including the choice and colour of materials, which have also been selected for robustness and longevity. Additionally, extensive areas of high-quality public realm and landscaping are proposed. This includes extensive tree planting, as well as creation of a main square and a central lawn for the enjoyment of occupants of the building and also the general public. Connectivity will also be improved between the station and the town centre, providing an attractive route for people travelling through the site. There are no technical reasons why reserved matters approval should not be granted. Additionally, there are no objections from statutory consultees or from the council's technical officers. Furthermore, the Civic Trust has also responded, confirming support for the proposals. Summing up, the application has been assessed in detail by officers and consultees, and the recommendation is to approve. On this basis, we respectfully request that reserved matters approval is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, anybody want to start it? Anybody want to move approval, get the prestige of making this thing happen? Anybody? Councillor Stansfield, you've got the honour. Moves approval.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's an application which has been on the cards for a while, and now we've got to a stage where we can see what's coming. It's going to make a huge improvement to the area, and on that I would like to recommend the officer's approval.
Seconded. Councillor O'Hara. Are you speaking? Seconding, yeah, okay. Anybody else want to speak? Great enthusiasm, smiles everywhere, yeah. I think it is, well, obviously, clearly it's one of the most important and significant employment initiatives for all our time, I suspect, in local government. And it's been obtained after a tremendous amount of work with our MPs, with representations to Whitehall, and of course a feeling by the civil service that their own estate was fragmented, needed an awful lot of money spending on it, and it was an ideal opportunity to help themselves and to help us. And of course the retail value of having 3,000 souls shopping in the town centre is going to be enormous, and those people will spend money in entertainment as well as in living expenses, and I think it's something we all very much welcome. I don't think there's any dissent being shown, so can we put it to the vote? Those in favour of approval, please show. That is unanimously adopted. Thank you very much indeed for that. That concludes our agenda for today. Thanks for your, well, I don't know, I think we've enjoyed it in a way, have we not? Thanks very much for your attendance. The meeting is now adjourned. Until next time when we meet just before Christmas. Remind me, Jennifer, what day that is?